Why am I not growing, Mama? Toby once asked his mother. Her throat tightened. You will, my son. God's time is the best. But it's been 15 years. She had no answer. At 15, Toby looked no older than 5. His limbs were slender like the branches of a young palm tree, and his height barely reached his mother's waist. His voice, though sharp with intelligence, carried the soft pitch of a toddler. From behind, one would assume he was a small child, until he turned around and looked you square in the eyes with the wisdom of a boy who had seen too much and understood even more. He lived in Umuchieze, a remote village surrounded by thick forests, red earth, and ancient secrets that clung to the air like smoke. The kind of village where the rooster crowed before dawn and women bathed under the cover of banana leaves. Superstitions were not just whispered in corners, they were rules etched into daily life. Tobe's father, Okonkwo, was once a proud man, known for his booming voice and booming laughter. A blacksmith by trade, he worked with fire and iron, shaping machetes and hoes for the villagers. His arms were thick, his chest broad, but ever since his son's strange condition became a subject of ridicule, he had grown quiet. The fire in his forge still burned, but the fire in his eyes had dimmed. His mother, Ijoma, was a woman of resilience. She had given birth to 3 children, but only Toby had survived. She prayed every morning, visited every herbalist within 5 neighboring villages, and fasted until her bones showed, all in hopes that her son would grow. But 15 years later, her only child still wore clothes made for toddlers. She had sewn each outfit by hand, altering them constantly to fit his narrow shoulders and tiny frame. The villagers called him names behind closed doors. Miri Abuo Ekwugi Ibiya, 2 waters that never speak to each other. It meant something wasn't right with Tobe. He was a mystery, a quiet stream flowing where no one could see its source. Children avoided him, not out of fear, but out of confusion. Some whispered he was a spirit child, Ogbanje, who had chosen to stay. Others claimed his parents must have wronged a deity and now paid the price through him. A few were crueler. Toby, when will you start crawling? Is he drinking baby milk or palm wine? I saw a newborn calf bigger than him. Each joke was a knife to Ijoma's heart. Still, Toby smiled. He smiled when he carried water on his small head. He smiled when he fetched firewood from the forest. He even smiled when the village boys, bigger, meaner, and full of foolishness, shoved him into the mud. He would rise quietly, dust himself off, and say nothing. But at night, when the moon hung low and the crickets sang, Ijoma often heard muffled sobs from the corner of the hut where Toby slept. He always thought she was asleep, but a mother's heart beats in tune with her child's tears. Why am I not growing, Mama? He once asked. Her throat tightened. You will, my son. God's time is the best. But it's been 15 years. She had no answer. Okonkwo spent most of his days hammering iron. Sparks flew around him, yet his face remained blank. He had stopped laughing when Toby turned 10 and still fit into the same pair of shorts from 5 years before. Ijoma, on the other hand, never stopped fighting. She visited Nwani Udu, the herbalist, every week. She gave money to pastors for anointing oil, bathed Tobe in bitter herbs, and rubbed his body with concoctions that smelled of ash and roots. Nothing worked. One evening, after a long day at the market, Ijoma sat on the wooden bench outside their hut and stared at the sky. The clouds drifted slowly, as if unsure where to go. Beside her, Tobe sat with his knees pulled to his chest. Mama, he said softly, do you think I'll ever have a beard? She chuckled, but it cracked at the edges. Why beard? You don't even have armpit hair yet. He laughed with her, but the silence that followed was heavy. In Umuchiedzi, nothing remained hidden for long. People talked, and when something didn't make sense, they blamed it on curses or spirits. Whispers spread like dry Hamatan wind. One market woman said, maybe he was stepped over as a baby. You know that can stop a child from growing. Another replied, if that's the case, why didn't they just undo it? You step over again in the opposite direction. and the curse breaks. A third woman added, "Ha, that's if you even know who stepped over him in the first place." They all clicked their tongues in pity, but none of them offered real help. That night, Ijoma lay on her mat, her eyes wide open. That old belief haunted her thoughts. Stepping over a child can stunt the growth. Her mind replayed the past. Who had held her son as a baby? Who had come visiting? Who had laughed and played beside his sleeping form? She couldn't remember, but someone did. And far away, on the edge of the village, an old woman with sunken eyes and trembling hands was preparing to return home after many years in exile, with a secret that could change everything. The evening sun melted behind the hills of Umuchis, casting long shadows over the village. The air felt strange, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. Birds flew low, and even the goats bleated uneasily. Something ancient had stirred. Ijoma noticed it first. She was returning from the stream, balancing a calabash of water on her head when she saw the figure approaching from the narrow footpath that wound through the woods. The woman wore a long dark wrapper and a faded blouse. A tattered scarf covered her head and her feet were bare. She moved slowly, like someone carrying the weight of many lifetimes. At first, Ijoma thought she was seeing a ghost, but as the figure stepped into the clearing, the light fell on her face. Deep wrinkles etched like rivers across her skin, eyes milky with age but sharp with memory. Her lips were thin and cracked, but they held a grim line of purpose. "Nwanyi, Ochi," Ijoma whispered. The calabash slipped from her head and shattered at her feet, water spreading across the red earth. "Don't be afraid," the old woman said, her voice raspy like dry leaves in Harmattan. "I have come back for the boy." The entire village gathered that night. Word had spread fast. Nwanyi Ochi, the ancient woman banished nearly 20 years ago, had returned. She had once been known as a midwife, a seer, and a keeper of forgotten traditions. But after a series of strange events and the mysterious death of a newborn in her care, she was cast out. Witch, they had called her. Devil woman. Now, she stood again in the heart of Umuchieze, her bones shaking, but her spirit unbroken, and she was asking to see Toby. "Ijoma," she said, sitting on a low stool beside the dying fire, "bring me your son." Okonkwo shifted uncomfortably. Why now? After all these years? The villagers whispered among themselves. Children huddled behind their mothers. Even the village chief, Omego, arrived, his white beard trembling as he sat beside the fire. "What business do you have with the boy, old woman?" he asked. She stared into the flames, eyes reflecting their glow. "Because he is not sick, he is not cursed, he is stuck." "Stuck?" Ijoma echoed. "Yes," she said slowly, "stuck in the space between growing and not growing, and unless it is undone soon, he will remain there forever, or die before the next full moon." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Toby stepped forward. Dressed in his little blue shirt and patched trousers, he looked like a child in the midst of giants, but his face was calm. "I'm not afraid," he said. "If this can help me, I want to know." The old woman nodded. "Then listen carefully. What I'm about to say will sound foolish, but the world is not made of only what we can see." She looked around the circle of faces. "There is an ancient belief," she began, "older than any man in this village. When a child is stepped over while lying down, especially one so young the umbilical cord is barely dry, it causes a spiritual imbalance. It's like stepping over a growing seed and sealing the ground behind you. That seed will never rise unless the act is reversed." Okonkwo frowned. "You mean someone stepped over my son and blocked him from growing?" The old woman nodded slowly. "Yes, and it was never undone." The villagers murmured. Some shook their heads, others clutched their children tighter. "Do you remember who it was?" Ijoma asked, her voice trembling. Nwanyi Ochi closed her eyes. "I was there when it happened. 16 years ago, Ijoma had just given birth. It was a rainy season night, thunder cracking across the sky. Toby was a quiet baby, born without a cry but eyes wide open. Nwanyi Ochi had delivered him in a rush, the labor coming early. The rain had flooded the footpath and most neighbors stayed away, except for Chisom, Ijeoma's teenage cousin, who had come to help. I remember now, Ijeoma gasped. Chisom was playing on the floor while I lay with Toby beside me. He jumped over the baby to get to the door. The old woman opened her eyes. Yes, and he never stepped back. But it was an accident, Ijeoma cried. He didn't know. It doesn't matter, the seer said. Whether by accident or not, the deed was done. And now, the boy is caught in between. Okonkwo stood up. So what do we do? Where is this Chisom now? Ijeoma's voice broke. He left the village 10 years ago. He moved to the city, to Aba, I think. Nwanyi Ochi looked up at the night sky. Then you must find him. Bring him back. He must step over the boy again in the opposite direction before the next full moon. The chief cleared his throat. And if they don't? The old woman looked into the fire, her voice barely above a whisper. Then the boy will wither and fade away. The journey to Aba was long and dangerous, but there was no time to waste. The very next morning, Ijeoma wrapped food in banana leaves, packed her small bag, and kissed her son goodbye. Stay with Papa. I'll bring Chisom back. I promise. Toby held her hand tightly. Be fast, Mama. I don't want to die. She swallowed her tears and nodded. You won't, my son, not while I still have breath in me. Okonkwo placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder as Ijeoma boarded a bus that rattled like a box of loose bones. Meanwhile, strange things began happening in Umucheze. The crop around Ijeoma's compound began to wilt, even though the rains were steady. Tobe started to speak in his sleep, words no one understood, spoken in a tongue older than the village itself. He would wake up sweating, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Something is pulling him away, Nwanyi Ochi warned. The longer the reversal is delayed, the more he slips into the spirit world. Okonkwo stopped going to the forge. He sat outside every day, watching the road, waiting for Ijeoma's return. In Aba, Ijeoma searched the streets with worn-out slippers and aching feet. She asked strangers if they had seen Chisom. Some shrugged. Others gave wrong directions. Days passed. Her money ran out. She slept in a church one night and in a bus stop the next. Finally, in a mechanic shop near Ariaria Market, she saw him. Chisom, no longer the lanky boy she remembered, now a grown man, muscular, with oil stains on his hands and tired eyes. He didn't recognize her at first, but when she said his name, something flickered in his face. Guilt, perhaps. Ijeoma, is that really you? She didn't waste time. You stepped over my son when he was a baby. You never stepped back. He never grew. Chisom blinked. What are you talking about? You blocked him, she said, voice cracking. The seer confirmed it. You have to come back. You have to undo it. He laughed at first. You came all the way to Aba for this nonsense? Please, she begged, tears in her eyes. He's dying. His face hardened. Look, I didn't do anything. Whatever is wrong with him, it's not my fault. You were there, don't you remember? I was just a kid. I didn't mean it. But you did it, she whispered. Please, Chisom, help us. He looked away, jaw clenched. For a long moment, silence stretched between them like a rope about to snap. Finally, he sighed. All right, I'll come, but only for a day. Then I return. Back in Umuchi's, Tobe's condition had worsened. He no longer spoke. He stared at the wall, unblinking, as if listening to voices no one else could hear. The spirits are calling him, Nwanyi Ochi warned. If Chisom does not arrive soon, it will be too late. On the evening of the full moon, just as the villagers gathered again around the fire, a bus rolled into the village, kicking up clouds of dust. Ijeoma jumped down first, covered in dust and exhaustion. Then came Chisom, looking unsure of himself, his eyes darting around at the familiar faces of a childhood long forgotten. The full moon rose that night like a swollen eye in the sky, watching, glowing, waiting. The villagers gathered in the open clearing beside Nwanyi Ochi's hut. No one dared speak above a whisper. Even the children were silent, as if instinctively sensing that what was about to happen went beyond human understanding. The wind had changed. It no longer whispered through the trees. It moaned. Low groaning sounds carried through the air like the voices of ancient ancestors calling from beneath the soil. Palm fronds swayed violently though the air was still. Fireflies blinked in frantic patterns, swirling like restless spirits. In the center of the clearing, Toby lay motionless on a woven mat. His face was pale, his eyes shut tight. His tiny body was wrapped in a white cloth, barely rising with breath. He looked like he was being offered to something or someone. A deep chill fell over the village. Women clutched their wrappers. Men rubbed their arms. A thick mist began to creep from the edge of the forest, curling around ankles and wafting toward the boy. Nwanyi Ochi's voice rose above the hush, strong and commanding. Do not fear, but do not blink. The spirits will pass among us tonight. Chisom stepped forward, his face pale, sweat glistening despite the cold. He kept glancing behind him as though expecting something to pounce. Come, she told him, handing him a chalk carved from a sacred Iroko branch. Mark your right foot with this, so the spirit knows who you are. He obeyed with trembling hands. Now, she said, step forward. The wind stopped completely. The trees froze. Even the insects ceased their chorus. Chisom took one step. The moment his foot passed over Tobe's body, the fire in the center exploded, rising several feet high and then vanishing in a flash of blue flame. Gasps and screams erupted. Then came the sound, not from the forest, not from the village, but from the earth itself. It was a deep groan, like something ancient working beneath their feet. The ground shivered, not violently, but as though something large had shifted below the surface. And then, a scream pierced the night. But it was not Tobe's. It was a woman's wail, sharp and distant, echoing from all directions. Then another and another. Dozens of cries, angry, mournful, wretched. Chisom fell back in terror. What is that? Who's crying? Nwanyi Ochi closed her eyes, voice steady but grim. Those are the spirits of stunted children, souls trapped in between. They gather whenever one of their own is near release. The mist thickened. Shapes moved within it. Shadows of small bodies, limping, crawling, reaching. Mama! One ghostly voice wailed. He took my years. Give them back. Mine! Mine! My legs! My bones! The villagers huddled in fear, clutching each other. One woman fainted. Another tried to run, but Nwanyi Ochi snapped, Do not move. If you flee now, they'll follow you into your dreams. The shadows reached for Tobe. His body twitched. Nwanyi Ochi turned to Chisom. Quick, step back over him. Now, before they claim him as one of their own. Chisom eyes wide with terror as he raised one leg over Toby's body. The wind howled. The fire flickered violently. Dogs barked in the distance. He hesitated. Do it, Ijoma cried. He stepped over, then turned and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. For a moment, silence, then a loud crack, like thunder under the ground. The shadows froze. The mist sucked back like a retreating tide. The spirit screamed again, this time in rage, and vanished into the trees. Toby's body jerked. He gasped, chest heaving, mouth wide open as he choked on air like a newborn. His back arched off the mat. His arms stretched unnaturally. His tiny frame pulsed, twitched, then went still, then slowly. He opened his eyes, deep brown, glowing faintly, confused, alert, alive, and growing. Before their eyes, his wrists thickened, his cheeks filled, his legs lengthened just slightly, but noticeably. The villagers burst into shouts and tears, but Nwanyi Ochi didn't smile. She only stared into the woods where a pair of glowing eyes still lingered in the dark. The spirit had left. Over the next weeks, Toby began to grow, not rapidly but surely. His voice deepened, his arms filled out, his clothes no longer fit. He ate with hunger he had never known. The curse had been broken, And from that day forward, the village of Umucheze never forgot the lesson passed down through generations. Never step over a child lying down, and if you do, step back, lest you bind their spirit and stunt their future. Sometimes, the smallest actions, driven by ignorance or neglect, can cast the longest shadows. What we dismiss as mere superstition may carry truth that's deeper than we know. In a world where unseen forces move with us, how careful are you with the steps you take? What do you think? Can an innocent act like stepping over a child really curse their growth? Have you ever heard this superstition in your village or home? Share your thoughts, stories, or any African beliefs you grew up with. Let's keep our traditions alive in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story gave you chills.